I want to welcome everybody, and I think everybody knows everybody here. But why don't we just go around and introduce yourself and then tag somebody else? And I'm gonna introduce myself as, even though my name says Amelia, which I will change. I'm Mike Merwicki, and I am one of the 2 state representatives in the Windham 4 district of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster. And I will tag my district mate, Michelle Boston.
Thanks, Mike. So I am the other representative for the same district, and not nearly as experienced as my district mate, but learning the ropes, and glad to be here and have a chance to chat with everybody. And I will tag my right-hand man and assistant, Jonathan.
I'm Jonathan. I am currently a senior at University of Vermont and working under Michelle as her personal intern, doing anything that she may need on any weekly notice. Cheryl, I'll tag you.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm Cheryl Charles, and I'm a resident of Westminster. Happy to be here, and thank you both for your service. Oh, and I will tag Eva.
And yeah, Eva Munden, and I'm grateful for the 2 of you, Mike and Michelle, for the good work that you do for us, and the fact that you've put yourself out there online. I don't know if other representatives do it anywhere, but it's been so helpful and so valuable. So I really appreciate your being there for us. Yeah. Oh, I will tag Russ.
Hi, Russ Lazarick. I'm a resident of Westminster, and I thank you guys as well for sharing what's going on. And I guess I'll send it back to you, Mike.
Sure, thanks a lot, Russ. And Russ is fairly new to the area, I think. Is that true?
About 18 months, yeah.
Yeah, so welcome, and I hope you're finding your way here, and sounds like you got here just in time for COVID. But
yes.
There will be lots of things to do and ways to meet more people in the community pretty soon. So I'm just going to give a little introduction and report, and then I'll pass it over to Michelle, and then we can have a conversation here. So I'm glad people can be here on what for us down here in the South is a snowy morning. And even with the snow and the cold day, most of us in Vermont are safe and warm. While in other parts of the country, this has been another week of violence, and especially towards our Black and brown brothers and sisters. From the shooting in Minnesota to the traffic stop in Virginia of uniformed military personnel to the mass shootings again that are starting up. I'm going to ask if we can just take a moment of silence here and recognize the violence that's been happening, and hope we can come together and center as a group and as a nation. And so please join me in just a moment of silence. Thank you. There is some good news, and actually lots of good news. And on the COVID front, vaccinations are continuing to go way up. I think we're over 3 million a day nationwide. And initially, President Biden had set 100 million vaccinations in 100 days, and we beat that by quite a bit. And I think as we continue to move ahead and get more people vaccinated, more people are going to feel good about going out, and that's good for the economy. But even so, in March, nationally, the economy, retail sales were up 9%, which is a big jump. And I think there's a lot of pent-up economic demand out there. And once we get cruising again, I think we're going to be back on track. In Vermont, unemployment's back down to 2.9%, which is not far from where it was before the pandemic hit. A lot of businesses, though, are still treading water. So a lot of our work in Montpelier or in the legislature is how do we support those businesses? There's some more money coming from Washington to Vermont, and what we're going to be trying to do is figure out where that money is best spent, and how do we make sure it's going to be well spent. It's one thing to send money out there, and I see Sam Farwell just joined us. Hey, Sam. It's one thing to send money out there, but we want to make sure the money goes to where it's needed the most, and then that when we send money out there, it goes for what it's meant to be used for. So that's been a big part of what we've been doing in the legislature, and every committee has been trying to figure out how do we do that along with the other pieces that we're doing. This week we spent a lot of time on two bills primarily. One was updating the bottle bill, which we first passed in 1972, and I make note that Vermont had some landmark environmental legislation we passed when Vermont was still pretty much a one-party state. You know, going back to the time of Lincoln, Vermont had been a Republican state, and it was the Republicans at the time who were leading the way on making Vermont an environmental leader with our Act 250 environmental protection, then our bottle bill, 1972. So we felt it was time to update that bottle bill because things have certainly changed as what we drink now and what we buy in the store has expanded so much. We felt like we needed to expand that. You know, first of all, the bottle bill is an anti-litter bill. One of the biggest challenges is, and I noticed this when we had that nice weather, going out on my bicycle, the roadsides continued to be littered with bottles. And people will pick up the deposit bottles, but not necessarily those other bottles. So that's why we decided we needed to expand what's going to be a deposit. So that's, I think we exempted milk and milk products, but otherwise a lot of those juices, sports drinks, and water bottles are going to be part of the bottle bill now. We're going to have a deposit on them, but we think that's going to inspire more people to get out there and return them, first of all. And if they are dropped on the roadsides, that will pick them up. And we also passed a tax bill this year and this week. And a couple of things of note. We decided, and this was going along with what the Senate did, that Vermont was one of the few states that taxed military pensions. And what we decided was people give service to this state, to this nation, that we didn't need to tax their military retirement benefits. So what we did was we exempted the first $10,000 of retirement benefits. And we'll see how that goes. If we need to expand that, we will. And the other thing we did was we took the sales tax off of menstrual products. I think this has been happening in other countries and other states. But Michelle can tell you, taking on those two bills took on a lot of time. These were big changes, and I understand some people don't want change. And I think on Wednesday we started our day 9 o'clock in the morning, and we didn't finish debating these bills till 9:30 at night. So there was a lot of chit chat around that, and Michelle can give her impressions on such long debates. So I just have one more news item I want to mention. And if you read the Brattleboro Reformer, you could see the other day that there was big news in Putney. Henrietta the beaver had got stranded below the falls behind the general store next to the paper bill. And it took a few days, but enough people came together. And I think that shows the spirit of Putney, the spirit of Vermont, that we were able to help Henrietta get back upstream to her lodge further up. So I love it when we could do things like that, and it makes front page news here in Vermont. So On that note, I'm gonna pass it over to Michelle here so she can share. And I just want to start by saying, though, Michelle's been a great asset to work with. She has jumped right in with 2 feet. She's been a great member as part of our county delegation. And I will note, we have 14 members in our county delegation. 11 of them are women. So we're moving in a good direction here in Vermont. And Michelle has been right there doing some great work to help us move Vermont forward. So thanks a lot, Michelle.
So nice to everybody. I was gonna actually give similar to Mike, so I can skip some of the items off my agenda. In terms of the last week or two, I will concur with Mike that we have had some incredibly long days. And honestly, I wouldn't mind doing the incredibly long days if it felt like we were really processing things that were important and that people hadn't decided about. But it really feels like I'm getting a taste of kind of the Vermont dose of the filibusters that you hear about down in DC. We kind of have that here. You would not believe the number of questions people asked about the most obscure elements related to the history of recycling in Vermont, whether or not this kind of beverage or that kind of beverage. I mean, it really just felt like people were trying to delay the ultimate vote. And in the end, when we had the vote, it was about a 2-to-1 vote in favor of the bottle bill. So it was a little discouraging, I guess, to be tied to the computer for such a long time, to really feel like I was witnessing some theatrics that weren't really helping with our decision. So that was a little discouraging, although in the end, as I said, we did support that particular bill by a very strong margin. And I feel like that was really good work. And the tax reform bill that we did was also complicated in certain ways. But in the end, I think we really did, as a body, we've done some good work, long work and good work. One thing I just wanted to mention in terms of my own updates is that when I was working with Jonathan, my intern, about sending out press releases to help people learn about this meeting, he had included something in the press release about updates from caucuses. And the person that actually was receiving the press release at the Reformer wrote back and asked me to clarify that. Apparently, she didn't really know what the work of the caucuses was and didn't feel like it was clear. And I thought, well, if somebody at the Brattleboro Reformer doesn't know what a caucus is, then probably some of my community members and constituents don't know either. So I'm just going to take a moment to describe that, because as a new legislator, I find the caucuses really invaluable as a place that I can learn. We have a citizen legislature. We're only in session officially 5 or 6 months out of the year. We've been in since January. And one of the ways that we can learn about the different issues that are impacting our state and pending legislation is by joining caucuses, which are collective groups of people who are focusing on certain issues. So Mike and I both attend weekly meetings in the Social Equity Caucus. Mike and I also both participate in the Climate Solutions Caucus. I also tend to go to the Women's Caucus and the Workers' Caucus. And sometimes I also go to the Rural Economic Development Caucus. And so when I go to those meetings, basically those meetings are a collection of both legislators and community members who are passionate around those issues, who will talk both about concerns about things that need legislation and also about pending legislation, and what are some strategies or some ways that we could help to move these ideas forward that we care about. So the way I organize my updates is I'm going to give you a little bit of an update from the different caucuses that I've attended. So in terms of the Social Equity Caucus, which is one that's close to my heart, they've been promoting a lot of ideas to try and work at making our society more just. And one of them that my committee, actually, I'm on the Corrections and Institutions Committee, and one of them that we've been working on a lot recently has to do with criminal justice reform. And so in terms of, we have a new bill that's going to be coming to the floor next week, which is dealing with probation reform. And basically the idea is that we want to acknowledge that a pretty large percentage of people who are on probation, if they successfully complete the conditions of their probation for the first half of the term that they're assigned to, they're extraordinarily unlikely to have problems in the second half. And being in probation for a longer time actually is just creating log jams in the system and creating challenges for the people. So basically this particular bill is giving people who are succeeding in meeting the conditions that are set for them the opportunity to get off probation sooner. And we actually just voted on that in my committee. It was the last thing that we did on Friday, and we voted it out 11 votes to 0. And my committee includes some very conservative Republicans and some very lefty Democrats. I would say I'm probably the farthest in that particular direction, but we have a really wide span, but we all were in agreement that this was the right move, that this was going to be helping to make our justice system more just. Another one in that realm, which I have actually a pretty strong investment is that I actually put forward a bill, about 2 months ago. I submitted a bill on bail reform. And I actually was called to testify for the Judiciary Committee about this bail reform bill last week. And you might not think, oh, bail reform, how is that a social equity issue? But it really is, because what happens with bail is people who can't afford what seems like a low bail of $200 sometimes are stuck in prison for months and months and months, especially during COVID when the courts aren't operating properly. By the time they get to court to face their minor charge, they've served more time waiting to be bailed out than they would have been sentenced to if they had been able to have their sentence done initially. And so it's really a way to incarcerate the poor and let the people who have more economic means not be incarcerated. And it's not just. So that's something that's being worked on. I'm not certain if it's going to be voted all the way through the system this year, or it might not make it till next year, but they're working on it right now. The testimony is being taken the same day that I gave testimony. State's attorney from Chittenden County testified. Somebody from the ACLU was going to testify. And so that's something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Having come out of work at the Community Justice Center, I see the way that unjust justice policies can damage people, and that supportive justice policies can help them in terms of reentering society in a more constructive way. So I'm really grateful to see those kind of policies moving forward. In a slightly different realm, but also in the social equity realm, I was really happy to see in the last month that the Healthcare Committee brought to our attention, and we voted out of the House and sent over to the Senate, legislation which would provide healthcare for undocumented women and children. And we had testimony that about 50 people a year, because they are undocumented, have had challenges getting prenatal care and have had challenges getting care for their children. And so I feel really good about the fact that Vermont is taking care of the people that are living here and helping with our harvest and helping with so many other things, that we're going to be able to provide healthcare to those people who haven't been able to access it until they get to the ER, at which point the health problems are a lot more complicated. So I'm grateful that's moving forward. I feel like we heard enough about the bottle bill from Mike. I will just say that that was a bill that, more than anything else other than pensions, that is the bill that I have received a lot of feedback from constituents about. The huge majority of people were supporting that and saying they hoped that I would support it, which I did. But I actually had a couple people that were supporters of me in my campaign who really were opposed to this bill. And so it was interesting. It had some interesting dialogues back and forth. And in the end, I feel like I made the right choice. As I understand it, 88% of Vermonters supported this bill. And we weren't quite that margin in the House, but it was close to that. It was probably like 75 or 80% that supported the bottle bill. And I do feel good about us moving forward with that as well. In terms of the Women's Caucus, one of the issues that we had been hearing about was this tax reform bill, which included the taking menstrual hygiene products from the taxable goods item category. And we actually had some youth groups that had written to us. We had some women groups that had contacted us. And it seems in some ways like maybe not a huge deal, but for people that are impacted by it, it is a huge deal. So I was glad that was able to be part of a rather complicated tax bill, but that was able to include that part, which will include women of a certain age. Another update that I wanted to provide for you is just that I've mentioned in the last couple of meetings, actually, that there's a group in Bellows Falls and Westminster area that's been forming to work on equity issues. And they actually have decided on a name. They're calling themselves the Humanity Network. And it's a small group of people, not just from Bellows Falls and Westminster, but from that general vicinity, working on both racial equity and other types of equity work. And later in the meeting today, we're actually going to be hearing from Dan DeWalt about a restorative justice program that he is bringing to Putney. And that particular group is actually going to be also offering some things through the Humanity Network group. So some of our offerings will be overlapping here, and you'll be hearing about them in multiple ways. The final thing that I wanted to provide a little update about, I actually feel like I to call on Cheryl Charles and see if she might be up for giving a little update about the situation in terms of our Westminster divorce. As a school board member, Cheryl's been in very frequent communication with many entities, including Mike and I. And I would love if you could give a short little update about where things stand and the school board hearing that's happening on April 21st. That could be really helpful. Is that all right, Cheryl?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. It is correct that the voters in Westminster pretty overwhelmingly voted in January to withdraw from the forced merger with Athens and Grafton, the union school district that was created a couple of years ago now. And then voters in Athens and Grafton did what was needed by law, which was to approve Westminster's withdrawal. That then led us to request of the State Board of Education that they consider our request to withdraw. And as Michelle just said, we are now on the agenda for the April 21st hearing of the State Board of Education. David Major has been asked to represent the voters of Westminster in making that request. The grounds for the State Board's consideration, I believe, by law, need to be focused really on the educational qualities of what Westminster can offer. The test is whether or not Westminster can provide adequate education for our children consistent with the rules approved by the State Board. I believe there's no issue about that whatsoever. So I'm hopeful that this will go well. And if that is the case, then Westminster will again elect representatives to a local town school board of 5 persons on a rotated basis, and the issues related to the town's school will once again be considered at the town meeting, which is something that's very important to a great many people in Westminster. So that's where we are. We'll know a lot more this week. I don't think it'll be decided finally at the April 21 meeting, but we'll get a strong indication, I believe, of the direction we're going. And I will personally thank both Mike and Michelle for writing a commentary that was published pretty widely in support of Westminster's efforts here. So thank you both.
So Cheryl, my understanding is there may not be a decision or right away, and it may actually take several meetings of the state board till they come to that place. Is that your understanding also?
That is my understanding, that we've been guided to say that it could take some months. We'll see. The earliest date by which we could have a reinstated town school board is July 1. So we'll see. You know, it's possible that could happen with April, May, and June meetings potentially on the horizon. Well, we'll see. Yeah, yes, I don't believe that they will decide ultimately at the April 21 meeting. That would be lovely, but I don't think they will. Especially that would be lovely if they voted to approve it. You know, but at any rate, that's where we are.
But Cheryl, I wonder, not to put you on the spot here, but you're an educator and you've been involved in this for a number of reasons, but could you share a little bit of your background as an educator?
Oh, well, thank you. I did begin actually as a high school teacher quite a long time ago now. I have a PhD, a Doctor of Philosophy degree in curriculum and instruction, which means that I care a whole lot about the educational experiences that teachers provide and the support for them, by the way, and what children experience. I've worked at the national and the international levels in education now for a long time, a director of major projects that help integrate effective ways of teaching and learning. And in my case, especially with a commitment to the environment, I have done a lot of what some people consider pretty leading work in that field, and continue to do it, quite honestly. So to try to have children understand ecological principles through firsthand experience that in turn reinforces all of their learning in all major subject and skill areas. So it's a nature-based approach that's one of the dimensions I bring to this. Having said that, I'm just a strong supporter of quality education for all children and the support for the teachers that is needed in order for their mental health and well-being, to be served as well. So I'm a big advocate for children and teachers, and I really commend the voters of this region for their support for the schools. I think this is a set of communities, and Vermont overall. One anecdote, I used to live in New Mexico, in the state of New Mexico. I moved here when my husband passed away and our one and only offspring married a Vermonter. And in New Mexico, we were often at the bottom of of all the kind of measures of children's health and well-being. We were in New Mexico, it was either Mississippi or New Mexico oftentimes, that was doing the worst in terms of care for children. And Vermont was always near the top. I have to say that I am thrilled to be at a state where we care so much about children and families and the health of communities overall. And the education system is a big part of that. So thank you. Thanks for the question.
Well, we're glad to have you here. And, when we're in debate on the floor, one of the rules is you're not supposed to ask a question that you know the answer to. And I did ask you a question I knew the answer to, but I wanted people to know that while you're very passionate about supporting our kids, that there's a strong foundation in education that you bring to this debate as well. So thanks for sharing all that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Mike, I actually just thought of one more thing that I had meant to mention and forgot to, which was just a tiny little update. I mean, like I had mentioned that the two things I've heard the most from constituents about was pensions and bottles. And I didn't really talk about pensions, and that is something that's an issue still very much in the forefront of our awareness, even though the timeline has thankfully been restructured a little bit. So we have more time to figure out what's happening with that. But I don't know if people on the call are aware or not, but there was an announcement made, I think just about a week ago, that rather than dealing with the pension issue in terms of coming up with a firm policy this year that was going to determine the future of the pensions, they were going to set up a task force that was going to look at the issue intensely, focus on some structural changes in terms of governance. And then next year, when we come back as a legislature, we'll be able to look more closely at what can we do to make the pensions sustainable, to honor the contracts that have been with the workers, and try and figure out, which is honestly a very daunting task. And I think having some more time is going to serve us well to figure out what are the best ways that we can do the best work that we can do in terms of our employees and the sustainability for the system.
Yep. Thanks, Michelle. And I'm glad you brought that up. That is a task that's been assigned to the committee that I work on, House Government Operations. And I'll just briefly share. At the beginning of the session, the treasurer, Beth Pierce, raised a warning flag, a very serious warning flag, that some of our pension funds are in trouble. And some of this trouble goes back to the 1990s, when there was a decision that was made that led to underfunding, what was called underfunding. In 2007, we put together a plan, which was sort of like a mortgage, where we put a plan, we're going to put this much money in every year, and then in 25 years, we'd have that money paid off. What we found, though, one of the problems that was affecting that is, doesn't matter how much we put in, if the pensions weren't performing. And the reality, what we saw was that despite a booming economic markets, the pensions were languishing. And we have brought up the idea, and we're going to be changing the governance, that we feel like we need to have people on those pension boards who are experienced and well-schooled in the financial markets. It's one thing to have union members who are inspired to help and who are well-meaning, but it's obvious to me that they were overmatched. And to be able to not meet your goals during a market that is, performing over the last 10 years about 13% profits, and to not even make half that, we decided we need to change the governance. Now, that was one of the biggest parts of why we weren't meeting the goals. It's about a third of that amount. So that's one of the changes. Now, when we first started to hear about this, my suggestion back in February was to start a process to gather people around the table and take the time to come together. And that's exactly what we've put together now. We're going to create a task force that's going to meet from when the sessions ends to in the fall, that brings together people from the union, people from the administration, people from the legislature, to try and come to a solution, a long-standing solution. We don't want to come back in another 5 years and say, well, we've still got problems here. So we're working on that. We're trying to find the best way forward. And I think maybe just like Henrietta the Beaver, people will come together and find a solution to get us out of this. So, but anyway, we have some time here now, and we have some folks. I wonder if there's any questions on other things that are happening. I know Sam came a little bit late to the party here, but I don't know if everybody knows Sam Farwell from Dummerston. He and his wife Carol and their kids live in West Dummerston, across the other side of the river. And your dad lives with you now, right, Sam?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
He could be on this call, but I'm not sure he's up and at it yet.
Okay. So how are you doing there?
Good. As long as I've got the floor, I'll ask a couple of questions. And you were talking about the pension, and that's really sort of, I read the news, and that's, so I get concerned. Can you throw out any numbers that would enlighten us at all? I mean, it's hard for us to wrap our minds around it.
Sure.
And I don't even know how, in the General Assembly, how much you actually are getting into the number crunching, but I'd like to get some kind of sense of it quantitatively, if it's possible.
Sure.
Because I've got the story.
Yeah.
We stopped, we underfunded it, and there's the market performance, yada, yada, yada. But what are we talking about?
Yeah. Well, one of the reasons there's four main funds. One is around healthcare, but then there's three performance funds. And one of the biggest problems was that there's the three performance funds are for the teachers, municipal employees, and state employees.
Oh, there's a municipal one too. Okay.
The municipal employees is actually in pretty good shape. It's funded at about 80%, which is what they tell us we should be at. And some of us say that part of that is because municipal employees contribute at a rate of 11%. The state employees, their fund is at about 68%, which is not great. We want to be up 80% or more, but it's a little better than the teachers fund, and part of it, they make a higher contribution. They're about 7%. The teachers fund, however, is only at about 51%, and that is close to a tipping point from what the financial people tell us. And as some people have said, that's 51% is one economic downturn away from being into a death spiral. So that's why we're trying to raise the awareness of this, that we have to do something. And at that level, though, the teachers' contributions are at 5%. And now the state's been trying to backfill this. And I'll give you an example. This year, employees will contribute $40 million to these funds. and the state's going to contribute $460 million. So we're trying to put, whenever we can, extra funds in there. One of the biggest challenges we see, though, is that if the funds are not going to perform, then we're not going to get out of the hole. And that's one of the biggest pieces why the governance of those pension funds is really important to us. We need to get them performing like the rest of the market. We've been in a boom market. We can't assume that market's going to continue to boom. We hope we have some better times ahead. But we want to make sure, like I said, in 5 years, we don't come back and say, we've still got a problem.
And Mike, are the state's payments, is there some sort of formula that the state is trying to follow, that, it's some percentage of the payroll, that's supposed to go into the fund, or is it really just up to the legislature to decide how much to put in every year?
No, like I said, in 2007, we put a plan together that would address the arrears we were in.
Right.
And we were putting extra money in every year. And as an example of this year, we're putting in, we're scheduled to put in $460 million.
Right.
In some places, employers make an equal match, which would have been, if employees were putting in 40 million, we would have put in 40 million. We're putting 10 times that amount in right now. What we're concerned about is we don't want to get to a place like the state of Illinois, which next year their projection is their entire state budget, or 29% of their entire state budget, is going to go towards pension debt. That starts to choke out other things. And Illinois is in a situation by itself, and I'm not sure where they're going to go. They have towns in Illinois right now that are trying to have municipal bankruptcy laws changed so they can declare bankruptcy to actually walk away from those pension debts. We don't want to go there.
Yeah.
That's why I think it was a courageous thing for Speaker Krawinski to say, this is a problem. Nobody's going to like this, but we have to deal with this. And that's where we're at right now. We're trying to face a really difficult problem with no easy solutions.
Yeah, and you've got my support, absolutely, to keep working on it and get it back to 80%.
Yeah.
I used to live in Illinois.
Okay.
My property taxes and income tax were much lower, and they don't have as much money. It's pretty simple. Well, it's not that simple, but that was a fact. They enjoy lower tax rate. Is the teacher's pension fund coming out of the education fund? Or, because we send our property taxes into the education fund. Is that where the pension fund, or is it all?
It comes from the general fund.
Comes from the general fund. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So things get
But
mixed.
at some point, all these things connect to each other.
Yes,
we have these different funds, and sometimes, like for a while, the transportation fund was doing really well, and money was being taken out of it.
Right.
And now the problem with the transportation fund is we're not driving as much because we're driving more efficient cars, and what we generate from gas taxes is not enough to pay. So, that's another problem we're going to have to deal with down the road, especially if we're encouraging electric vehicles. How do we maintain our roads without a gas tax?
Yeah, you need tax on tires or something. I don't know.
Yeah. So one of those pieces moving forward. Yeah.
All right. I don't know. I don't want to hog the floor,
Nope.
but I have more questions, and they're not very interesting, maybe, if you don't like talking numbers. But the tax reform interests me as well. And I was just curious if that was all about sales taxes, or if it was also getting into the income tax structure. Did you tackle everything?
there's, I will send you a copy of the bill. Because one of the things we do in Vermont is we have piggybacked on federal policies.
Yeah.
And a couple of the things that were very important to people and businesses is people who were unemployed this year were receiving benefits. In a normal year, those benefits would get taxed. The federal government, President Biden said, we're not going to do that. These are hard times. We want to help workers. So we're not going to tax unemployment benefits at the federal level. So what Vermont did, we had to change our statute to say, we're going to emulate what the federal government is. We're not going to tax unemployment benefits in Vermont either. And similarly for businesses that got PPP loans, and a lot of those loans were forgiven, but it still shows up as income on their spreadsheets. That's not going to be taxed also. So those are just a couple of the pieces in income tax, but I can send you a copy of the bill.
Okay,
and-
I'll give it a shot.
Yeah. So those are just a couple of the highlights.
But you didn't get into restructuring the brackets and
We didn't, because Vermont and Washington, D.C. have the most progressive income taxes in the country. And that's the way we think it should be. And we haven't changed that right now. There's the challenge with that is we have a governor that was elected with 65% of the vote who says, you're not raising taxes.
right.
And there's many of us who would vote to raise taxes on the upper 1%. But we don't have the votes to override a veto. So that's kind of a tough situation to be in.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So we have another, I think, person or persons that have called in here. And I think that might be Dan DeWalt. Looks like it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, Dan.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
So Dan has, if people are okay with this, Dan's over on the other side of the mountain from me in Newfane. And here comes the music. Good question.
What was that?
Not sure.
It was
Maybe we're
frightening.
getting hacked.
Anyway, so Dan, you've been involved with restorative justice work, and you've got some community projects going on. Could you take a couple of minutes and share what you're doing and what you're trying to do in Newfane and Putney and Westminster, Bellows Falls?
Yes, thanks. It just so happened I called Mike this morning to tell him what we were up to and enlisting some help, and he told me about your meeting. So thanks very much for letting me jump in the last few minutes. So I'm the director of Restorative Community Practice of Vermont, which has up till now been Restorative Community Justice of Southern Vermont. So we're changing our name, broadening a little bit. And what we have embarked upon is a series of community building circles. At first, this particular project is targeting Putney and Newfane, and we have sort of a similar thing going on that was initiated by folks in Rockingham that we're working with them to the same kind of end. And what we are trying to do is hold a series of first community building circles where we invite folks from the community and we ask them to reflect upon the national trauma, healing from the various challenges of 2021, and how we've all been personally affected by these various things that have happened, and get people to reflect on their own needs and their own unmet needs and their own sort of fears and worries. And after we have a couple of community building circles like that, then we hope to focus in on some issues that are actually affecting the town and causing tension, whether that be gun issues or racial issues or political or newcomer and oldcomer issue, whatever it might be in a town. I know Newfane has some tension.
Vaccination issues.
Vaccination issues, yeah. I think from reports we've seen that Putney has also experiencing that. And so we had two of our initial community building circles, which went really well, but it was pretty small numbers. We had a half a dozen folks. And so before we moved on to the conflict resolution circle, we decided to take a step back. I'm meeting with the select board next week to tell them what we're up to. So we're just doing a bunch of outreach to try to find more people. And we would be quite happy to contact people directly and invite them to do these things. Because right now, of the 6 people we had, they were pretty much like-minded folks. And we're really hoping to get people who see the world from a different lens to get into the same circle to first experience how they can have some universal commonalities. And then secondly, to actually work on that and see if we can have a conversation. And well, we would facilitate a conversation that would be guaranteed to be safe and in a situation where people would be able to really be heard, possibly by at least being able to speak without interruption and having prepared folks to hear them. And when we do the conflict resolution circles, that'll actually be a more formal conference where we will have contacted each participant ahead of time for an individual conversation to make sure that people are in the right kind of frame of mind to be able to have a community conversation that is constructive and works towards restoration as opposed to condemnation. So we're just reaching out, looking for suggestions of organizations or people who we might be able to call from all sides and all spectrums to invite them to this series and to just see what we can generate using the power of restorative practices to foster good communication and better relationships within a community. So that's in a nutshell what it is. We have I sent Mike a few paragraphs describing it, and I could be happy to share that with you in some fashion. I suppose I could.
Sure.
Put that in the
Dan,
chat.
how do people get in touch with you?
You can contact us at rcjsvt.org, which is our website, or rcjsvt@gmail.com, which is our email address.
Okay.
And I'm going to, I guess I couldn't. I was hoping I could just copy that and put it in the chat, but I am not skilled enough to do that apparently.
I'm not sure any of us are, except maybe Jonathan. So maybe
Right.
we can get Jonathan to help when we Jonathan's our intern from UVM. So he can help us disseminate that information.
Okay.
So you've done these programs in other towns?
Yeah, we had 2 of these circles in Newfane, which were actually very encouraging, and we were lucky enough to have some people of differing views, and it was a really great experience. And those folks are primed. We haven't taken the next step to go into the full conflict resolution circle in Newfane yet, but we're in Putney now, and we're working on that, and then we're going to come back to Newfane and revisit. We're going to redo the initial circles. Also, we're going to do the whole program over again. So because it seems like it's effective, but it also seems like we haven't hit the magic the formula for getting enough people involved. So we had to take a couple steps back, and that's what we're trying to do now.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that work, Dan. I think this is something that the time is coming, and especially as we start to open up more, maybe we can get more people to start coming out.
Yeah, we're doing a combination. We've been doing it on Zoom. We're hoping to be able to move to in person outside with maybe Zoom as a rain date. And I was just speaking with the Newfane Library today, and we will be able to do things outside there with a Zoom accompaniment thing at the same time. So we might be able to do both.
And Michelle was saying you're going to do something in Westminster or Bellows Falls also?
Yeah, Lori Rabu, who's one of my colleagues, has been meeting with folks in Rockingham to basically do the same, to set up perhaps a series of restorative practice trainings, get folks there trained to be able to do circles themselves, and with the same general goal of promoting constructive community dialogue. Really is what we're trying to do.
Great. Well, thank you. And
you're welcome. Thanks for
does
letting
anybody
me.
have questions for Dan?
Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. Hi, Dan. I've been interested in this, ever since I heard about it back as restorative justice. and I just give an example of I think it played a part in a young man who lit a fire in our church in Dummerston. And I think he eventually did go through the program in Brattleboro of some type of restorative justice. He sent a letter to the church. It was quite a while later, maybe 2 or even 3 years, but it was essentially a letter of an apology. I did feel at the time that the church, had an opportunity to jump at some sort of restorative justice right away that we didn't take. And, there was very little harm done by the incident. There was some physical damage. But the community was very, affected by this sort of, just it's like a break-in to your home. Sometimes nothing's taken, or whatever. It's the emotional damage that sometimes is harder to recover from. And I really wanted to advocate for something like restorative justice, but I didn't know how, and I didn't know anything about it, and I didn't feel like I was the person who could lead us there. So anyway, that's just my experience and my interest.
Right, well,
Just to give you feedback.
we are a little different. A lot of the restorative community justice centers, or the community justice centers in the state, are financed by the Department of Corrections, and their caseload is usually diversions and people coming out of prison and reintegration into the community. And so their dockets are usually pretty full. We are not, we are funded simply by fundraising, which is means we aren't funded by much. And we are different. We are free, and we are for anyone in the community. So what we're trying to do is get people involved in restorative solutions before they get involved in the criminal justice system if they can. I mean, we can work on diversions and things like that, but that's not really our focus at the moment. And so we're trying to, we're a parallel organization, and we work actually closely with those organizations, but we have a slightly different mission. So they can feed us cases where they're not really, don't have the time or the ability to deal with it. And that's what we're about. So we are trying to build overall, our long-term goal is to build a really large community of volunteers who are skilled at this work, so that when people are experiencing great or small conflicts, and they can be quite serious conflicts too, there's someone, hopefully a neighbor who knows how to do restorative practice and can do that. But in the meantime, we're an organization, people can contact us, and we provide that sort of work free of charge and do what we can to make that work.
I see. And so do you think networking with churches in the area would be a potential?
Yes, we've done that already, and that's proved that's been great. I networked with some churches up around Westminster and Chester in that area, and then we got a few of those folks to do some of our trainings. And so yeah, churches I've actually made a few different presentations to churches, and just trying to let them know what we're up to.
I was just going to say, Sam, the group called Humanity Network, which is the equity group in Rockingham, Westminster, and it's actually a little broader than that. I mean, it's got scattered members from around that corner of the county. They're actually working, as Dan mentioned, with a woman named Lori, who's going to be offering these circle practice trainings. And we haven't got the dates yet, but it's going to be somewhere this summer. We're going to offer a training, and it's not like it's for any one person. Like, it's really open. We want to make it available so that wherever you live, you'll be able to utilize these skills. And so if you're interested in that, you can send me an email or send me your contact information. I'd be happy to make sure you're on that list so we can follow up with you when we do have those dates ready.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and we offer an ongoing series of trainings of that nature. So the ones in Rockingham will be like, right now we're in the middle of a 6-week session. So the ones in Rockingham may be the next ones we do, or if not, the ones sometime soon after that. But it also, at our website, you can contact us, and if Rockingham does that and you can't make that, this is something we do on an ongoing basis, and so you can connect with us that way.
Eva, go ahead.
Yeah, Dan, I wonder how long has this organization been in existence, and who are some of the members of the board or the organization itself, besides
Well,
yourself?
We've been in existence for, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years? I never keep track of time. A number of years. Folks on the board are Pat Holleran, Lori Rabu, Gary Kaiser, Lynn Bedell is our treasurer, and Susan Gunther Moore and myself. And there are a couple other board members, but they are inactive, and we are actually in the process of trying to enlarge our board. So that's another thing that we're trying to do at the same time, is grow our board. And the purpose of our board is not so much fundraising. We're looking for people who are actively interested in promoting restorative practices. So that's the focus. Whether so far we survived, and so far we have enough money, we have a contract person that does some work for us. Whether this is a long-term viable way of doing it where the board isn't just about raising money or not, we don't know, but our mission is to promote this work. So that's what we're trying to enlist the board as part of that mission more than a fundraising board.
And is it set up as a nonprofit, and is it an overlap with what Michelle's talking about, or
Yeah, Lori, that's our organization that Michelle's group is working with, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit, have been for almost 3 years or something. 4.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Eva. And thank you, Dan. I appreciate you coming and sharing this. It's good work happening. So we've come to another hour here together. And please know that anytime you want to get in touch with us, we're there. We have, you can find us on Facebook. I have a website, windham4.online. I have the easiest phone number in Putney to remember. It's 387-8787. And operators are standing by right now to take your calls. But we want to hear from you, and we'll be doing another one of these as the session winds down in May. And we're always open to your suggestions or questions. And if you know somebody that's having some trouble, whether it's getting medical care, medicines, they're unemployed, whatever, they don't know where to turn, please tell them to get in touch with us. Anything else, Michelle?
I think we've given the sampler update, and if nobody else has a question, I think we're good.
All right, well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye now.